Breaking news situations for you this morning. In Maryland, a shooting at a high school, 3 people injured, nobody killed. This is about an hour southeast of Washington, D.C. The school right now is in lockdown, and we are told the incident has been contained. We could be getting a news conference anytime, any moment now. We'll bring you that when it begins to get any new information from St. Mary's County. We're also waiting for an update on the package explosion at a Texas FedEx facility. Authorities trying to determine if this latest blast is tied to a suspected serial bomber in Austin. There are reports that the package was bound for the state's capital city, Austin, Texas. Keep it right here as we follow both of these developing stories for you this morning. But first, another battle brewing on Capitol Hill, where a news conference with House Republican leaders is expected to begin at any moment as Congress tries to pass a massive spending bill before Friday's deadline. We've seen this movie before. Welcome to a brand new hour of America's Newsroom. I'm Sandra Smith. A lot of breaking news this morning, Eric.
Very busy morning this morning. Thank goodness there are no fatalities in that school shooting. Hello, everyone. I'm Eric Shawn, in for Bill Hemmer. You know, one of the biggest roadblocks to a deal on Capitol Hill? Getting border wall funding and a DACA deal into that package. Meanwhile, White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders, well, she's blaming Democrats for the holdup.
Republicans are there. The president is there. He has made multiple offers trying to get Democrats to actually do their jobs. I think what we're seeing is that the Democrats would much rather use DACA recipients as pawns instead of actually putting real solutions forward and making things happen.
Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel is live on Capitol Hill for us this morning. Mike, what is the pitch for this $1.3 trillion government funding package?
Well, Sandra, good morning. Part of it is they must get this done in order to keep the government up and running through the end of the fiscal year. This could be the final major piece of legislation this year, and so there are efforts to attach other items to it. We do expect to hear from House leadership any time now, and part of that pitch will be the investment it makes in rebuilding our military.
Well, I hope so. If you weigh the good and the bad and the ugly in this bill, the good is pretty important when it amounts to fixing our planes and ships and training that has been neglected for so many years.
Another key Republican says lawmakers will get this done.
We're in good shape. I mean,
really?
We've made a lot of progress. There's still a few issues out, but most of them are settled, evidently. And, the money issues, I think, are largely settled. So you're in the policy writer sort of business right now, and we'll see where we go.
A spokeswoman for House Speaker Paul Ryan told me moments ago they've made a lot of progress, but they're still fighting for a few more items. Sandra?
Mike, what about fiscal conservatives worried about the return of the trillion-dollar deficits?
There's definitely a lot of anxiety about that. There are also some lawmakers who say they want to read the fine print of what's in the bill.
Everything's a work in progress. There is nothing defined, and so I don't know that you can even make an informed decision on whether to support it or not.
The top Democrat on the House Armed Services Committee says he is very worried about the nation's $21 trillion and growing debt.
Unless you're planning on dying in the next 2 or 3 years, worry about yourself, because the debt and the deficit are going to have a profound impact on us. The irresponsibility of the budgeting process over the course of the last 15 years is truly breathtaking, and it places our entire country at jeopardy.
Since there are still some ongoing negotiations, I'm told it is trending toward a vote in the House on Thursday. Then it would get kicked over to the Senate. Sandra?
Mike Emanuel, thank you.
Sure.
Well, as we mentioned, DACA and funding the border wall key this morning as lawmakers work to try and reach a deal to fund the government by midnight on Friday to try and avert that showdown. But House Republicans say when it comes to those immigration issues, their Democratic colleagues, well, not willing to negotiate. Joining us now is Congressman Mark Walker of North Carolina, chairman of the Republican Study Committee. So, Congressman, the Democrats seemingly refusing to budge. What do you think could push them to make a deal?
No, your information is very much on time as usual. What we're hearing this morning, just walked out of conference, is that continues to be the holdup as far as the immigration side. Border security, Democrats are not wanting to budge at all as far as funding for the wall. But I would also say many of us Republicans have a major problem with the amount of spending that's going on here in Washington, D.C. You heard Chairman Thornberry talk about the good and the bad and the ugly. The good is very good, but the bad and ugly is very bad and ugly as well. We've got to do a better job. We can't leave this kind of deficit close to $1 trillion this year, and that's a problem for many of us.
Yeah, $1.3 trillion. I mean, how do you address that when we just heard one of your fellow colleagues talk about a $21 trillion debt that we're leaving to our children and grandchildren?
Yeah, it's very concerning for many of us here, because even if you look several years of the Obama administration, you had deficits of 35% and 40%. The last three was 15%, 12%, and 14% respectively. We're looking at something close to 17% this year, 21% next year. The defense funding needs to go up. I get that. I've stood in the empty missile silos, but $63 billion for non-discretionary spending is a major problem for many of us. We have to do better than that.
So what's your advice?
Well, the Speaker this morning, and if I can remember his exact quote, once we get through this moment, we're going to be looking at entitlement reform. Specifically, he mentioned welfare reform. Representative John Ratcliffe and I just released an op-ed on a balanced budget amendment. Washington must be more fiscal responsible, or it's not only about politically, it's not only about elections, it's about doing what's best for the next generation.
So when you're dealing with the wall, the $1.6 billion, I mean, is that too much? Should that be pared down? What would you suggest concretely, specifically, to do with that?
Not at all. I mean, that is something that strictly is tied to our defense. We've seen the gang violence. We appreciate the president, the administration cracking down on some of those. Human trafficking is another issue. We must secure our borders. We've seen the sanctuary city issue without getting into the details of that. We've got to do a better job at that. But there are non-discretionary defense items that we can curve back. We've got to take a look at entitlement reform. I know the president has talked about sometimes not touching some of these entitlements, but a third of the budget is strictly entitlements. We've got to take a look at that, and we've got to bring a sharp pencil. Social Security won't even be solvent in the next decade or so if we do not handle some of these items.
Well, we just saw Conor Lamb, the Democrat, he's ahead. The counting is continuing. And during his campaign, and you expect moderate Democrats will hammer away on this, no touching the Social Security, Medicare, or any of those entitlements. So what would you suggest to the folks on the other side of the aisle?
I think it's a false argument. If we don't touch it, if we don't deal with it, it will not exist in 12 years. I'm 48. By the time I'm 60, it won't exist. More importantly, for my children and grandchildren, if we do not have something in place, what kind of legacy is that leaving? And Republicans have both houses. They also have the administration. It's time to bend this bell curve. It can't happen overnight. I get it. But we must show some true discipline. We have to be the adults in the room. We have funding requests by the billions every single week, Republicans and Democrats. But someone has to step up. Republicans have to step up to be able to bend this back.
And finally, in terms of Friday, you expect a deal so the government keep going?
We do. Listen, give a shout out to leadership is pulling this as far to the right as possible. They did a great job. Appropriators worked all night to hold the high language to make sure those pro-life provisions are not affected. The Senate kind of had backed up on that. We appreciate those guys doing that. It's trending in the right direction, but we need more.
Congressman Mark Walker of North Carolina. Better get back in that room, get to work. We'll see you reporting what you're doing later on today. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Eric.
Sandra?
We have an update for you. We are waiting now a news conference to begin at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time on the most recent package explosion. This coming in San Antonio, FedEx facility in San Antonio, Texas. Authorities there on the ground have not been able to yet tie this to the suspected serial bomber in Austin. But this explosion is the latest part of this investigation. Authorities are on the ground there, certainly looking for any answers. As you can see, the microphones are gathering there. This will be a very important update. Anything that they are learning on this most recent explosion at that FedEx facility there.
And it could be a big break that the authorities are hoping for this morning, if indeed that suspicious package is a bomb device that did not go off. That could give authorities and investigators a lot of clues about the possible identity of this mad bomber, who has now been basically 5 potential bombs so far, that tripwire, as well as a potential bomb in that package at the FedEx facility in Austin, after earlier this morning the one in San Antonio exploded. So authorities, obviously, if we're expecting to hear if they will announce that they have a break in a suspicious package that is intact that could help this investigation.
Yeah, so the Austin police made everyone aware of this most recent incident in Austin, Texas. But as you said, it's a suspicious package. A hazmat team has been sent and begun an investigation in there, but no explosion there. We're most recently focusing on this explosion at the FedEx facility in San Antonio, Texas. So an update on this. And obviously the big question, Eric, is if there's going to be any ties to the serial bomber in Austin for explosions in just the past several weeks.
Yes, Sandra, it is really frightening and has terrorized the people of Austin, Texas, the capital of the Lone Star State. So you've got to wonder if that indeed is one of the reasons why this bomber has been targeting a state government capital. There have been militants in Texas in the past, so we don't want to speculate very much, but we'll find out what the authorities say when they have this news conference, because there have been a variety of methods that this bomber or bombers have employed. You've got packages left on the doorstep, a tripwire, which is very troubling, as well as potentially 1 or 2 bombs that were sent through the FedEx facilities. We'll bring you that news conference as soon as it begins. Meanwhile, the former Attorney General offering the current guy in the job, Jeff Sessions, some job advice.
I think Sessions he's got a fundamentally different relationship with his president, but he's got to have the ability to say, no, not going to do that.
Well, Eric Holder speaking out of Georgetown after Sessions fired FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe. Coming up, former Speaker of the House Newt Gingrich will be here to weigh in on all that.
Plus, a Fox News alert, an investigation underway after police discover the body of a college student who went missing in Bermuda over the weekend. What we're learning now, that's just ahead.
And as we've been telling you, lawmakers struggling, to avoid another government shutdown by Friday night. Congress still clashes over President Trump's border wall and the protection of the so-called Dreamers. White House Principal Deputy Press Secretary Raj Shah